Hello and welcome to my first attempt at doing some raid commentary. This video is off the cuff, pretty much unscripted, and I won't be editing it, so hopefully it's not too bad. For the most part, we're going to be looking at things from healer standpoint, but inevitably we'll end up going into some group strategy stuff since that influences how we do healing and mitigation. At the start of this fight, we're just going to throw up shields on everyone, pretty standard Scholar stuff. I'm not going to do a Selene into EOS swap with Feywind, just because it doesn't really make a difference in the grand scheme of things, and it's pretty tedious to do it every pull. You are free to deploy here, even though I don't. I just do a sucker. It's important if you have a Dragoon to make sure they get an Adlo though, because they'll take extra damage with Blood for Blood. Also going to excog the Dark Knight. You can do it with pretty minimal DPS loss, since that 30th floor stack is almost always going to be a GCD clip anyway. And as you can see, the excog's already procced on him, so pretty useful. What we're going to do with these twisters is we're going to stack with only 6 people. We're not going to mitigate them with reprisal or addle or anything like that. We're going to take them with 6 people, only with shields. And the reason for this is because we're going to build a lot of limit break, and it's going to ensure that when we get to Bahamut, we always have an LB3 for the Nael to Bahamut transition. If you look at our LB here, you're going to see it spike in a sec when we take the fireball damage. And the reason we get so much limit break here is because we take lethal damage from the fireball, which is avoided through the use of shields. So without those shields, we would have died, but with those shields, we don't die and we get a whole bunch of limit break. And then we're just going to do it again. So we have almost a bar and a half of limit break in the first 40 seconds of the fight. At this point, we go into baiting liquid hells. We opt to do this with 2 people, so the machinist and I do the baiting. Splits the damage a bit more, and it means that if the machinist has to go in for a hatch, that we don't ever derp and forget to put someone out for the baiting. Also, my DPS isn't hugely important in this phase. We have more than enough as it is. One point worth talking about, which is relevant here, is that when Twintania hits 44%, she's going to drop her second Neuralink. So with this twister, we're going to be moving her, but it's important to make sure we don't have too much DPS, otherwise she'll push early and drop it where she is right now. And that's something we want to avoid, because we want to get her over to number 2 to place that second Neuralink. On the subject of Neuralinks, we're using, I guess, some irregular placement. It's become pretty standard to put the Neuralinks on the spots where the bosses spawn in Felrin Trio, but we go with north, south, and east. It sort of tidies things up for 10 strike trio and the Nael plus twin phase. And it's never been a big enough issue that we thought we needed to change it. We're still able to do Felrin consistently. For these fireballs, I'm going to start over mitigating Swiftcast Sucker and Soil, just to make sure no one dies in case someone misses the stack, or the person who has the fireballs also has the stack marker. I don't know, it can get a bit ugly. So we're going to over mitigate those. We have plenty of limit break, and we can afford to do it. We're going to hold on to the second chain stratagem rather than use it here, because Twintania is going to push before her enrage regardless. So we're going to save this chain stratagem for Nael. It can be pretty frustrating losing those Boreal casts, but they really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. So here we're prepping for the push into Nael with the Heavensfall. Gonna deploy Adlo here. We actually push really fast on this run. Sometimes we get the death sentence or whatever, depending on RNG. So I'm a little bit behind here. Do get the deploy off in time, but it's a little bit sketchy. On this knockback, I always Swiftcast Sucker and Indom, unless I get a crit deploy. Our White Mage does the precast Cure 3, but I don't trust myself enough to precast on every pull successfully, so just save my Swiftcast for it. Here's where we're doing our openers. We are opting to use potions here, just for security. Even a single death on this phase can lead to things snowballing a bit, and having a couple more people fall over, and that's really a situation we want to avoid because it means getting a Raven's Beak at the end, and that's something we don't want. So we just use the potions to make sure we can push. In this phase, the damage on the tank is quite variable from run to run. So you can see on this run I end up casting a lot of physics. This is pretty unusual, but crit RNG and whatnot. XCOG's also really nice to throw on for those busters, since they always drop the tank below 50%, and that's a huge heal. Not too much to say about Nael. I think the phase is pretty uneventful once you know the dance in and out for fireballs and lightnings. It's nice to just throw up Whispering Dawn and even Fake Hove in this phase just to mitigate some of the ice damage and stuff on people. There's enough sort of incidental AoE that they come in handy. Also really important to make sure the tank's topped for the upcoming Raven's Beak, so that's what I'm doing right now. He's going to take this unmitigated just with Sheltron block, so he's going to get hit pretty hard. After that, just prepping for either the Meteor Stream or the Thermionic Beam stack to go with the dives. Getting Sucker out, tethering the Dark Knight, because he's going to take a lot of damage, or he can take a lot of damage here while we're running around, especially if both healers end up getting marked for dives. Gonna XCog him for upcoming damage. Unfortunately our ninja falls over, but I can get him up pretty easily. After that, it's just throwing up Sucker just in case we decide to get, or we end up getting 2 Thermionic Beam mechanics in a row. I think on this run we only get the 1 mechanic here before pushing. After that, it's just set up into the transition. You can see we easily have LB3 here, so it's pretty safe. It's possible to pass this with LB2, but it's just when you get one of those LB2 runs without planning for it, and you don't notice because you've done this like, I don't know, 300 times in one day, then people do fall over if you're not ready for it. So here we go into the trios. I like to bait a crit Adlo here if at all possible. It's really, really handy on this first trio, probably the only time in a fight where the crit makes a huge difference. Also, gonna use Divine Veil and throw up Fake Hove. Want to mitigate as much damage here as possible. Because I got a crit deploy, it means that I don't have to worry about healing the DPS for this Mega Flare stack. Without the crit, I'd have to run in an Indom, and the White Mage would have to throw a Size or a Swift Cast Medica or something, or a Cure 3, just to make sure they don't die. After that, making sure I get out of the way of the tank. He's going to take a load of damage here from these Flare Breaths and Autos, so making sure to heal him. Also really important on all of these trios to make sure that Eos is moved behind the boss before Flare Breaths happen, otherwise she will die. Not always, but often enough that you don't want her to be in front. Going into Blackfire, we're just doing the run to the edge strategy. Layla's group in Elysium, and along with a few others, are doing a strategy where you bait the fires along the edge of the room. But this strategy has been consistent enough for us. We're good enough at baiting so that we don't end up all the way at the edge. I do a Swift Cast Sucker. Sometimes that doesn't always hit everyone, or sometimes I'm a bit slow and the shields aren't up in time, but the shields aren't necessary. They're just sort of added layer of security, which is nice to have. You do want, Soil, Reprisal, Dismantle, or Addle as much as possible on those Mega Flares, just in case people aren't fully topped for whatever reason. Going into Fel Ruin, as you can see, our Neuralinks aren't directly under the bosses like they could have been with slightly different placement, but it's not a huge issue. when stacking for that Lunar Dynamo, it's imperative that you give tanks a lot of space and stand, you know, in the middle of the dynamo so that they can stand in front of you, get their tethers. While standing in that Neuralink, I do Emergency Tactics Sucker into another Sucker, just to make sure people have health for Meteor Streams and then have a shield for that Mega Flare. This is probably the best time to use Excog on the Paladin here, because they get absolutely smashed by that almost instantaneous Flare Breath. One other thing to note about Felrune Trio is we do have our Paladin Clemency, the Dark Knight. When they take, before they take Meteor Stream damage, because sometimes that Meteor Stream can kill the tank. Going into Heavensfall Trio, we're going to over-mitigate this as much as possible. I throw up Fey Elu, and I'm going to deploy, as well as having Divine Veil, and also going to rouse, throw up Whispering Dawn. We're going to have Medica 2 as well. With this level of mitigation, and with the hots ticking on everyone, we really don't have to worry about healing here. Just as we run around, we're going to end up at full health again by the time we get to the middle of the room. Normally I take the time just to cast 1 or maybe 2 physics at the start before I have to move on the lowest health people, just to make sure. And then I'm going to swift cast Sucker here as we move in for the fireball. The timing on this one's pretty good for swift cast. You can get the heal off before the fireball hits, but then have the shield apply for the Mega Flare. And then we're just into more Flare Breaths. If you haven't noticed already, Excog's really good. And the cycles for these trios line up really well so that you can always have a Soil, an Indom, and an Excog for each one. And that's how you should plan to do things. As tempting as it is to energy drain, the other skills are much more useful. Going into 10 Strike, you can kind of see a nice little strat that we have for our Neuralink placements, where we stand in this sort of cone formation and we can immediately see all of the hatch targets, and they can see each other. They know which Neuralinks to go to based on where they are. And we have a priority system for taking the second hit of the hatches. But it's a bit too complicated to explain in this video. It's not too relevant. Just that this is nice and clean, as long as you can see everyone at the start. Going into these Earthshakers, I Indom, you'll see a Swiftcast Medica followed by a size from our White Mage. And our positions for these Earthshakers are based off the markers. So we put 1 marker between 1 and D, 1 between D and 2, and then the other 2 markers go slightly outside of 1 and 2. So you see I go slightly wide of 2, and then the safe spot is on the unmarked part of the room. The second set of Shakers just put themselves directly in front of the first set, and it's nice and tidy. There are alternate strats for this, using like square markers and stuff, especially if you use the equilateral triangle formation for your Neuralinks. That's important to have a different system than the one we use. So we're about to go into Grand Octet. At this point, you need to get Bahamut below 59%. We've already done it, so we can kind of relax here. Again, we're going to save 2-minute cooldowns like Chain, Stratagem. Because if we use them now, the damage that we're going to get is pointless, and we want them for Twintania and Nael after Grand Octet. So going into Octet, you'll see that our Paladin is throwing up Divine Veil. I'm going to do a Swift Cast Sucker at some point while we're running around the room. We have double shields, and I'm also going to throw down a Sacred Soil. This covers us in case there's one person missing from the Mega Flare stack. If it's a 3 stack, people will still survive with this level of mitigation. Our strat, nice little bit of Mario Kart. You can see that Bahamut here is west, because our 1 marker is north, 2 markers south. So Bahamut's west. That means the dragons are going to dive counterclockwise. Also means that our movement around the room is going to be counterclockwise. We do a quick check to make sure that Nael is not directly opposite Bahamut. He's not. So we're going to dodge towards this dragon, directly opposite. Wait for Nael to dive, and then as soon as Nael dives, we just start moving around the room. counterclockwise. And we're just going to dodge everything like this. We do a little sprint just to make sure no one gets left behind. And then as soon as we see the Bahamut marker, we go to the middle of the room. The person who hasn't had a marker at this point is going to go out and bait Twin. And the rest of us are going to grab towers or do stack as necessary. You've probably noticed by this point, I don't have cleric stance. I'm running protect and I'm also running rescue. And the rescue is mostly for this part of the fight. If the Twintania person has the stack marker, I normally just rescue them just for safety. Even though they can run to their stack in time, just covers them if they're a little bit slow. Now we're into Nael and Twin. Gonna do the prep for this. Add lows on both tanks. In retrospect, I should probably just deploy here, but I don't trust everyone to be in the right place. So add lows on both tanks and our machinist, who's going to bait the liquid hells. Throw up Whispering Dawn, put the tether on the tank that I didn't use XCog on, and then we're just going into openers. It's perfectly fine to use potion here. If you do, it means that you'll have a potion up towards the end of Golden Bahamut. And with most groups, you should be doing an opener at around 3 minutes into that phase, and so that's when you would use your potion. We have enough DPS on Nael and Twin that I prefer to save the potion and use it right at the start of Bahamut. I can get a slightly better opener there because I'm not having to mitigate anything during the potion time. So like I said, our machine is baiting. I'm making sure to stand close enough that I don't actually get a fire puddle. Then I'm going to move out, regenerate. And as soon as the twister goes off, back into the middle of the room, Swiftcast Sucker, which is going to cover damage from a potential thermionic beam. Do the nail mechanic, dodge the twister, then back into the middle. Unfortunately, our Dark Knight dies here. Normally this would be a wipe, but fortunately he has Ultimatum. He was running it just for such an occasion as this so we don't throw away a 12-minute pull. So we are going to be able to recover this. Unfortunately I don't have Swiftcast because I always use it on that sucker. But for now, back into the middle, getting ready for the Mega Flare. Dark Knight gets up, I X-Cog again immediately, get Protect up. And I'm going to play a little bit safe for the rest of this phase. Just because I'm not entirely sure how much that death impacts things, but I want to make sure that that no one else goes down. Normally I'd be able to Bane here and stuff, but I'm going to save my Aether Flow this time just in case I need a Lustrate or something unplanned. Other than that, this is a repeat of the first cycle. I'm going to move out when the Generate comes, then back in, do the Swiftcast Sucker, then prep for Tank Buster, since the Tank Buster comes before the Mega Flare on this rotation. So Swiftcast Sucker, do the Nail mechanic, this time it's out, and then Thermionic Beam. Whenever there's a beam in Dom, we get this twister, then it's back in. I'm going to start ad-lowing the tanks, get XCog up for the Tank Buster. And then just start prepping for the Mega Flare. At this point, it's just waiting for the caster LB3 to finish them off. So I guess this phase can be pretty daunting as a healer. It's really nice at the start to stack hots, get XCog up, get shields up and stuff, so that you can get as much damage out as possible. Your goal should be minimally to keep all of your dots up on both enemies, for both you and the white mage. And then when you're not refreshing dots, you can do your healing, putting regens up, etc. Regens on movement's really good for white mage. Scholar can't do that much on movement, but maybe you can refresh your bio too, or otherwise you just forced to ruin too. But if you keep your dots up, you'll be doing some good damage. And then getting some extra broils in if you feel safe. Definitely good. Again, save that chain for Bahamut, the second one. It's not the greatest value. It comes up right at the end of the phase since it's 2.5 minutes long. So definitely better to save it for Bahamut. From here on out, it's just mostly a bookwork exercise, making sure you've planned mitigation accordingly. With our party composition, it's going to be pretty easy. Since we have both a caster and a machinist, we can alternate addle and dismantle for the Morniphars. For this first one, large-ass Adler deploy. Don't get a crit, doesn't matter. It's a little bit scary on this run because our summoner misses his addle or forgets to use it. So we're going to drop pretty low. Standard mitigation techniques for this phase is you want 3 10% mitigation cooldowns, so Soil on every Morniphar, Reprisal on every Morniphar, and then for us we can alternate Dismantle and Addle. So Addle on the first, third, and fifth, and Dismantle on the second and fourth. It's nice to use a little bit extra for each one. So be that Divine Veil, or Passage of Arms, or Fey Covenant, or Fey Illumination, stuff like that. An extra cooldown on each one just for security, because scary stuff like this happens where you nearly die if one person mistimes their debuff. Also important to make sure you don't drop your Shadow Flare too early and cancel your first Sacred Soil, because that's always an awkward conversation. Dodging X-Flares, there's a bunch of ways to do this. I really don't like going to the edge of the room and trying to dodge through an X-Flare, which is how the Japanese like to do it. I think it's really risky. Yep. Much safer to just go to a safe spot and then move into the wake of an X-Flare as it goes past you. So this is the second Akmorn. It's likely that your tanks are going to take the most damage from this one if you use immunities on the first and third, which I think works out best for every tank combination. So this is going to be like Rampart and stuff, so they're going to get hit hardest by that one. Make sure you heal them. Then we're up into second Morniphar. I'm doing Fey Elu Sucker with Divine Veil. And then we have our Reprisal and Dismantle. Then another X-Flare. After this X-Flare, don't get caught out. So after second X-Flare is the third Morniphar. So make sure you don't forget to mitigate. You'll probably notice when we're dodging these X-Flares, a Paladin is getting hit pretty hard. Make sure to heal them. Otherwise they will fall over from the damage. Here's the Morniphar. I put up Fake Hov, it's probably too late, but doesn't matter too much. We use Passage of Arms on this, along with Addle and Reprisal. So it's pretty safe. I make a mistake here. I forgot that we moved our Hallowed Ground to this third Akmorn. We had initially planned to do it on the last, but then we worked out a better plan. Just never got to actually practice it before this pull. So I cast a bunch of unnecessary heals there. So just more X-Flare dodging. On a pattern like this, really important to make sure you don't run back towards the boss too early. I mean, as a healer, I don't need to be there, but you know, this third set is going straight through the middle. It's very easy to run back into that if you're not paying attention. So for this Morniphar, doing the deploy, largest deploy again, just like the first one. Other mitigation tools, pretty standard, the Dismantle and Reprisal, along with Soil. And then this Akmorn is the one that's tanks will take it with a lot of mitigation. using intervention, so as you can see, they barely take any damage. My XCog on Iad, like, barely procs, not until the end. So this is the last Exaflare. If you did not use your potion at the start of this phase, this is pretty much where you want to use it. This is 3 minutes in, so you're only going to have another 30 seconds on the boss at this point. So this is where you would pop your potion, and where you need to do your second opener. I'm a bit sloppy on this. I should probably be thinking about using chain on the boss, but I'm more concerned about getting summoner up to make sure we have 8 people for the stack. If you only have a 7-man stack, you are dead. So if he wasn't up in time, we'd have to spread and just sack someone. But luckily we get him up, and he uses his virus as well. So this is the Enrage Mornifar, which is just going to start one-shotting people very quickly. It's a 10-second cast. As you can see, I just used my chain. This is way too late. I should have used it earlier. But I was a little bit preoccupied. I don't know why I'm putting up dots either. I should just be nuking. But at this point, yeah, just DPS, and hopefully you get your kill. Hopefully this video was useful. Please leave me some feedback. And if it goes down well, I'll try and do it again in the future. Thanks for watching.